The Lord be with you. Then let us pray. Merciful and gracious Lord, again we give you thanks for this Sabbath day. Long before we ever understood, and in fact, even now when many still don't understand, we need today to get our act together, to get our thoughts together, to remember you and your mighty acts for our salvation. So give us the gift of your Spirit in a special measure this day as we would seek to be about your life, your scriptures, and your grace. All these things we ask in Christ's name. Amen. If you didn't hear Pastor's sermon this morning, or if you were sleeping, you need to go back and hear it again. This one was one of those out-of-the-park occasions. Most pastors do not handle well the story of the generous landowner who paid the fellow who worked 1 hour the amount of money he paid the one who worked 12 hours. And there was a complaint about it. You know, there would have been an AFL-CIO grievance today. But the punchline of that parable, which you've got to hold on to white-knuckled, is, do you begrudge my generosity? Because the parable is not about wages and salaries. It's about the unmerited generosity of God. He forgives us even when we don't deserve it. Well, there's a really fine sermon to be heard about that right here at Good Shepherd this morning. Let me call your attention to this paper that I've handed out. We want to talk about today the east bank of the region of the Galilee. And it was rather heavily populated too, but Jesus seldom went there. And we'll talk about that as we go. It's called the region of the Decapolis, and there are a number of significant cities there. Decapolis means 10 cities, and actually most scholars believe there were at one time or another 18 or 19 cities in the, quote, 10-city Decapolis. But at any rate, it's a heavily Gentile area. The picture on the front page we're not going to talk about much today except right now. And that's the ruin of a Byzantine church at Hippo, or Hippos. Some put the S on it, some don't. If I'd have thought about it, I wouldn't have, but it's there now, and I can't do anything about that. I want to notice when the Persians destroy something, they do it so neatly. Look how they've laid all the columns out neatly in a row. Now, if you believe that, I've got a bridge I want to sell you. Technically, you're looking at the results of an earthquake. Remember the plates we've talked about, the African and Asian European plate that move in the Jordan Rift? When an earthquake strikes, the motion is in a particular direction. As we come down the Jordan Rift, in the 8th century earthquake that hit this area, it just leveled most everything. Remember I mentioned that the town of Chorazim had been destroyed by an earthquake. Capernaum was destroyed by an earthquake, all earlier than this 8th century earthquake. But when an earthquake comes, you can tell, archaeologists will know immediately, if everything's lined up like this, it fell over because the force of the earthquake went in a certain direction. Once in a while you see a situation where it's laid out evenly on both sides, which is suggesting that we're standing pretty much on top of that earthquake where the motion was up. And so just walking to the site of the ruins sometimes can tell us what happened there. Never would an army bother to line up the columns like this. This is an earthquake. Once again, because this is the Jordan Rift, and this rift runs all the way up from in Turkey, all the way down into Eilat. And then it breaks off and then continues again, but it's a separate rift underwater. At any rate, as we would go down this eastern bank of the Jordan, we would see this kind of damage. And that would mean probably that this thing stood until about the 8th century, 700s and something. It was not destroyed by the Persians in 614. It was probably destroyed by an earthquake. just a little bit. I thought I could try to sell you that bridge by telling you that the Persians had lined out these columns in this direction. I just couldn't resist putting that picture on the front page. If you turn the page, this is a map of the region of the Decapolis. I almost put last Sunday's map back in here again because all the names are not on any of these maps. You see Hippos up there just below the midpoint on the Sea of Galilee on the eastern side. Do you find Hippos? Yes. You see Gadara, which is on, looks up the hill a bit. You remember why cities were on the hill? Defense, primarily. It's on the hill. Actually, this whole side, this whole east side of the Sea of Galilee is on the Golan Heights. And the Golan Heights go up in most areas very steeply from the Sea of Galilee to a location of the city. They don't necessarily put the location of a major city right on the shoreline, though the harbors were all obviously on the shoreline. You see Pella. Pella is 18 miles south of the Galilee, and that'll mean something in a little while. Gerasa is over here about 10 more miles further south and east of the Sea of Galilee. That's present-day Jerash. Some of you have been to Jerash. This fellow right here laid on top of one of the columns at Jerash, and he couldn't reach the two sides of the column, but he is a little short. So, you know, so what's important, of course, is there are missing towns here, and we'll get to those in a moment. So let me talk about the Decapolis for a while. How many have heard the term Decapolis before? Okay, I need to start back at the beginning. All right. Decapolis means 10 cities, and the Decapolis was on the east side of the Jordan, was largely Gentile, not largely, almost completely Gentile. So that Jesus wasn't there very often. You remember I said that one reason he didn't work Jerusalem very hard, according to the synoptics anyway, was the fact that that's where Orthodox dwelt, and he had differing things to say about Jewish orthodoxy, about how one interprets the law. You know, because he healed somebody on Sunday, he got in trouble, and he said, which one of you having a lamb that falls in a well wouldn't immediately on Sunday pull it out, or Sabbath day, Saturday? And they couldn't answer him. Of course they would do that. They said, so much better than should I heal. So he was not disobeying the law, he was reinterpreting the function and purpose of the law. The same thing the Pharisees and the Sadducees did. For example, you could take a Sabbath day's journey. That was so many steps away from your home. That was as far as you could go on the Sabbath. But you could always walk to your next meal. So if you were affluent enough to have a servant to go out from Jerusalem along the Jericho road and every so many feet leave a lunch, you could walk all the way to Jericho on the Sabbath because you're always walking to your next meal. There's no law that can't be circumvented. So when one deals with the law, you can deal with it any number of ways. So, at any result, that's part of the problem with a religion based in that fashion. Laws must be updated as cultures emerge and change and modify. But Jerusalem was the perfecter of orthodoxy. We are the ones that interpret it. We tell you how to do it, and that's the law. So why should Jesus go there? So he goes to Galilee. Galilee is known for its rebelliousness. Galilee is on the Via Maris. There's strange people going through town all the time, coming up from Africa and Egypt and on around, finally going to Damascus. or even further north. So in Galilee, it was kind of an arena of differing ideas, so that you weren't encapsulated in one mode of thinking. Therefore, there was an openness in Galilee. I commented last week that strangely enough, many people followed Jesus. There's no evidence that any made any life changes to be converted into what he was preaching. Very little evidence of that. There were individuals, even Roman officers, the centurion, for example, who built the synagogue at Capernaum. There were those people. But the masses who came, 5,000 to be fed, and then the Gospels tell you 5,000 plus women and children, we may be talking about 15 or 20,000 people, all right? But there's no such entourage following him, no such suggestion of permanent life changes. Wherefore, he curses Chorazin, he curses Bethsaida, he curses Capernaum, because he said if the miracles done in you had been done in Tyre and Sidon, they would have repented. So, you know, we have this sense of disappointment. And that's in the Galilee. That's where people are always open to new ideas, and not infrequently open to rebellious ideas. So, as a result, that's the west side of the Galilee. On the east side, which comes right up, in fact, a few years ago when Iran and Iraq were fighting that long, torturous war, we befriended one of them, and we went right up from the Sea of Aqaba, right on up that highway, right into Iraq. So, as a result of that, this was also a major highway. It's called, by the way, ancient times, the King's Highway. And it was a major trunk line of transportation. When you'd be over there in Jordan, you would be going down to Petra, you would see an unbroken line of military transports carrying equipment and material to the war zone between Iran and Iraq. That's an ancient highway. By the way, just for the fun of it, the Jordanians put speed bumps in the roads. I mean, big, merciless speed bumps. And they're called by the Jordanians, and this is what they call them, sleeping policemen. If you think about it a little while, it's not so far wrong. It does tend to really, even on a big, cushioned tourist bus, you don't want to hit it over 20 miles an hour. It's quite an experience. Anyhow, this side, the west side, comes up all the way from the Gulf of Eilat or the Gulf of Aqaba, depending on where you live, all right on straight up into Syria, Iran, and Iraq. So this was an ancient travel lane. Now, why is that significant? Well, because first of all, the Greek population, which was significantly large, probably came with Alexander the Great prior to his death in 323 BCE. So when he died, of course, his followers, his team, his administrators, had nowhere to go but home. And that was a long trip. And this is a pretty nice place to live. It's temperate. It's relatively warm, except in the highest regions. It's moist. There's a good deal of rain that comes down from Mount Hermon and the clouds and the moisture in that area, and comes down and waters the Galilee as it does fill the Sea of Galilee. So it's almost aggressive agriculture there. You can grow 2-3 crops a year comfortably there. So, in addition to that, the Romans, when they arrived, have built in this Decapolis, we're talking about Latin now, 10 cities. In this Decapolis, the Romans have built significant cities, and by significant, I mean planned Roman cities. There will be planned housing, planned paved roads, planned public baths, most likely also a couple leisure world kind of retirement communities, because you see, the Roman Legion is there, and when you retire, they had the same 20-year retirement that we recognize in the military today. So after 20 years, they could quit and squat. And why go back? They were commandeered from all over the Roman Empire, so why to try to go back home? Let's stay here. So you had a large retirement community. Now, why would Rome care about that? Well, look at this map for a moment on page 2. Why does Rome care about that? Well, if you could see the rest of the world on the right side of this map, you would quickly recognize you're looking at the Arabian desert. And while Rome added the west part of the Arabian desert below this map to the Roman Empire, what they did in fact was build a frontier community to protect from invasion by outsiders. If you've got, the Israelis never let you out of the Israeli Defense Forces. The IDF, you can be retired, but you're always on call. And the Romans did the same thing with their Roman legions. People could retire in these places, but you had a trained, experienced, often hardened group of retirees that could pick up the shield and the sword and be on the battlefield in 24 hours kind of thing. Because to come from Rome with a troop ship, which didn't carry many actually, which really means to walk from Rome, takes a good while, 6 months or longer sometimes, and therefore rebellions can thrive for a while. The Bar Kokhba rebellion was so successful for a short period of time that they minted their own coinage, and a lot of it is available today. And it has the Bar Kokhba symbols and this kind of thing. That was in 143, if you're wondering, 135 to 143. It took the Romans 6 years to get on the field and deal with Bar Kokhba. Then they wiped up the earth with him. I mean, it was brutal. But the bottom line is, this became for them a force of delay at least. It was not unlike what we did in Germany. When Germany was divided, we stationed a sizable army in West Germany, but publicly admitted it could hold back the Russians no more than 3 or 4 days. But that was the strategy. Slow them up, give them pause, because it's going to be costly. Even though they'll win, it'll be costly, so they have to decide it's worth it. The Romans set up exactly the same thing, and they quartered them in a place called the Decapolis. Because of the Greek presence, and because Greek was widely spoken in the Roman Empire, the language on this side of the Galilee was very often Greek. There was a short time when the Ptolemies from Egypt ruled after the death of Alexander the Great. Then there was the Persian rule with Antiochus. We know him as Antiochus Epiphanes. That was not his name, that was a title he took, which meant Antiochus, God revealed, just like our Epiphany season talks about the revelation of Christ. The Jews went berserk because to claim God's identity was absolute, unforgivable, unacceptable blasphemy. So the Jews attacked through the Maccabean revolt, the Hasmonean family, the specific priestly family of the Maccabees, Judas Maccabeus. Thank you, Handel, you wrote the oratorio, and some people have heard about him. Judas Maccabeus. It may be a better Hallelujah chorus, by the way, than the other one. But at any rate, so we had Gentile languages spoken here. Yes?
Didn't Handel write a cantata about Judas Maccabeus?
Yes.
Yeah.
Sure. Judas Maccabeus is one of the oratorios. Question was, didn't he write an oratorio about Judas Maccabeus? Yeah.
Quick question about the map on page 2.
I'm sorry?
Question about the map on page 2. Some of the cities are in red while others are in green. Is there a reason for that?
This is the Decapolis here. Mm-hmm. The major cities are in red.
Okay, and the minor cities would be in green then?
No, this is on the west, the west side.
Okay.
We're talking about, this is a separate side of the Galilee, but it's Gentile. This is all Jewish.
Okay, so even, okay.
Okay?
Okay.
Thank you. I guess I have to not walk away, right? I went into the restroom and said, all of you be careful, I have 2 microphones on. So that this was, in fact, if you can understand this, an entirely different region, even though it's right around the Galilee. And as I said, you can drive your car around the whole circumference of the Galilee in 40 minutes. But it's just between that and the Jordan River and the Jordan River north of the Galilee, which flows down into the Galilee, it kind of made a dividing area. There are 2 places where Jesus was at. One of them was Caesarea Philippi. The Gospels clearly identify that, and all three synoptics tell us about that story. The other place that he was at was the place where he, exorcised demons from Matthew says 2 people who are possessors of demons. When Jesus asked his name, he said his name is Legion because he has many, many demons. So at any rate, the biggest interest is today, where was that? The Gospels tell us the region of the Gerasenes, and the Gospels tell us the region of the Gadarenes, depending on which Gospel we're reading. But that's probably a significantly different area. But anyway, finally, how different were they? They spoke a different language. They ate a different diet. They adhered to totally different, as you and I and the Jews would say, mythological religions. They believed in dualism. There was things material and things spiritual. Things material or bad, things spiritual or good. That's a heresy that won't die in Christianity because we continually hear people say those kinds of things. There's nothing spiritual about nails. There's nothing spiritual about cross. There's nothing spiritual about water. Yet Christians lay hands on all those things in understanding how God became human and dwelt among us. God affirms creation by becoming part of it. Are you with me? So the suggestion that, well, material things are bad, they always lead us into trouble, and spiritual things are good. In other words, if I think already, it doesn't matter what I do. And that's heresy. It's a heresy that rose early in the church and it won't go away. But nonetheless, that's the effect of Greek philosophy, even on the earliest Christian thinking. But the Jew does not think that way. The law is the law. It's concrete. It has to do with how we live in a real world. How far you walk on the Sabbath, just being an example of that. It deals with living within God's creation. And so the suggestion that God's creation is bad is saying a very nasty thing about God. That people fall in this creation ought to be evident. Adam had trouble with the apple. So, so should the rest of us, I suppose. But the point is, the struggle is living within creation, and accepting creation is one of God's gifts. Sometimes she's not here, so you'll have to tell her I said that. Once in a while I tell Doris she's God's gift to me. I don't do it too often, but at any rate. So there was just bad blood. We don't speak the same language. We don't understand the same religious values. We don't understand the same life philosophies. So it was not easy to intermix with the east side of the Galilee. Are you with me so far? You understand what I'm trying to say? And the why of that was the the pushing out of the indigenous people along the King's Highway as Alexander and the Ptolemies from Egypt, and then finally the Persians populate this area. So there was not much respect or love. Anti-Semitism is not particularly new. We generally dislike those and things and people that we don't understand. And the classical world had no real understanding for the weirdness of Jewish tradition. And if you don't think it's weird, go with me sometime to Jerusalem. Questions? All right, let me go on then. A word about archaeology. I've said this before. Archaeology sounds romantic and fun and all this kind of stuff. It's some really hard work. You get up at 3 in the morning when it's still cool and you dig until 6 or 7, and then you have breakfast, and then you dig until lunchtime or about 2 o'clock. And then when the heat is the highest, you stop and you eat again and you sleep, and then you have staff meeting and you discuss the dig and its progress and what things are and what they are not. And then you go back to digging again until about sundown. And you do this 6 days a week. Once a month, they take you to something like the American Colony Hotel, and you get a weekend. That's so you can get a shower and clean up and all this kind of thing, and then you go back to the dig again. First of all, it's miserably hard work. You dig with toothbrushes and putty knives, nothing as big as a hard, wide putty knife, because you might damage what you're uncovering. So it's slow work, and then you put all the dirt you've dug into a sieve and you sift it so that you don't lose anything from that thing. That's hard work. Second, you must be, absolutely must be, a historian. You must know the story of the place you're digging. Many times we don't know the story of the place we're digging. For example, generals would scatter scarabs over a devastated site when they had wrecked a town. They wanted people and history to know who. You know what a scarab is? Okay. If I had a big stone, oval stone in my ring, and that would be the shape of a scarab. It's not a live bug. And on the bottom side of that would be my shield. And you can impress it when you seal the document in wax, or you can scatter them around a devastated site so that when it's dug, when it's rebuilt, whatever, your name will be known. I did this. That was a common practice. But earthquakes didn't scatter scarabs, except they laid the columns out pretty nicely. And so in many cases, and sometimes just in the haste of warfare, not all generals did that. But when you dig a site, you don't know what it is. There's no road sign saying this is ancient such and such. It is if it's been dug. But if it's just a tell on the side of the road, you start digging, and you might have some clue from written documents. That's why you've got to know the history of the place. You may have some clue from written documents about what town might have been here. But you've got to know the history to do that. In addition to that, you've got to know biblical history. And I hope to demonstrate that a little bit with us this morning. So an archaeologist is not just one that has fun digging. It is really, in order to have the dig be meaningful, they have to be highly educated. If we're doing biblical work, have to be highly educated in the biblical period, before and after when we think this tell might have been built. So we've got to know when it came. We've got to look at the pottery. That's another thing you got to know. You got to be able to pick up a piece of pottery and say, this is Iron Age 2. Or this is Israelite Iron Age 2. The Israelites generally, coming into the land, were a little slower. The Canaanites and the Philistines had iron before the Israelites did. You notice how, for a period of time, the Israelites lost every war they fought with the Canaanites. It was and with the Philistines particularly. And it was a difference between living in the Bronze Age and living in the Iron Age. Bronze won't stand up to an iron chariot anytime. It's just riding into your death. And the Israelites were about 100 to 200 years later in coming into the Iron Age than were the Canaanites and Philistines of that area. So you've got to know those things when you dig. You can't go back to the library and start studying with an open dig, because you only got so long to dig, and rain is a devastating destroyer of what you have uncovered. And so you need to open the dig. You need to carry a briefcase of internal, comfortable knowledge about the history of the area, the history of the people who live there, etc. Are you following what I'm saying? These are incredibly bright people. I studied at the Albright during a sabbatical. I'll be right with you. Studied at the Albright during a sabbatical, and we had a person there studying at Hebrew University to determine the feasibility of a PhD thesis, and the PhD thesis was on advanced Army camps. Now, with armies going up and down this land bridge we've talked about, there had to be a series of camps that provide food, that provide weapons, that provide women, that provide all these kinds of things, so as you can support the army up front. All right? I think I can still say to this day, they have not found one significant advanced camp for all those armies' trips up and down. They got to be there. Well, anyway, the guy came back to this is out of a British archaeological school I was at, and formerly British, and he comes back during mid-afternoon coffee and announced that he's giving up his thesis topic. And one of the PhDs there just erupted. And she goes down the list of all the things there had to be to move an army of 50,000 people. And that's what these armies claim to be, or more. And she said, it's simply got to be there. And she said, you can't quit. Well, he was pretty coward that afternoon, but I don't know what he finally decided. But you think like an archaeologist, you can almost immediately put yourself back into, if I give you the date, you can go back there and sit cross-legged and tell me about it. The pattern at the Albright was after dinner each night, somebody was elected to tell us about what they were studying. And Paula, the same one who erupted before, had said at dinner, I'm studying non-flying birds. And one of the PhDs around the dinner table said, oh, right, non-flying birds. And Paula said, chickens, you dumb. So then, to try to save face, the guy says, well, I tell you, after dinner tonight, why don't we have Paula tell us about non-flying birds? Well, with that short warning, she spoke for over 2 hours on non-flying birds. And I was absolutely stunned. I mean, I've just never dealt with an academician with that much academic skill. And this was the whole company I lived with for a couple months. And was awesome. Yeah, let me back to your question.
Yeah, the Philistines, when I was reading...
I did it again. Well, I'm going to have to buy them a new one before long. Okay, it's still on. I dropped the microphone. Now, go ahead.
All right, the Philistines, from what I was reading, this is a few years ago, so there might be some new facts. Were the Philistines Etruscan part of Greece that they came over?
Well, they were from the islands. Nobody knows exactly.
Okay. And it was said that they brought chickens with them to the Middle East.
Chickens go way before them, if Paul is to be believed.
So these people were...
It is a long domesticated food source. But as she faithfully reported, there were whole cultures that never saw a chicken. So you say, how do we know this? Every dig, everything is saved. Everything is identified. Her husband was the bone specialist for that summer at the Albright, and he's sitting in a back garage in a workshop identifying all the bones from Telerod that they, during their dig. And he would have 3 piles. I haven't done these yet. I don't know what this is, and I know what these are. And he would label every one of them with a stick-on label wrapped around the bone. And I said, if I were doing that, that middle pile would be up to the ceiling. And he said, interestingly, most invertebrate anatomy is relatively similar. And he said it's a matter of size and scale, birds that have hollow bones, that kind of thing. But he said, you know, I'll pick a bone out of the pile and look at it how it was joined and say, I saw something that would fit that, and I saw it through this pile, and I find it and fit them together. Now I know what both of them were because I knew what that one was. And I just thought, Brian, I'd go nuts. But he did that all day, every day. And I said, how big has that pile ever been? He said, you know, it never gets much bigger than you see it now. Because as we go, we'll find the other bone that goes with one of those, and then we put them both aside. That's archaeology, all right? So it's not the working under a tent and finding exciting things. It's a lot of work. So we know that when you're digging a certain tell that bones don't exist, and therefore you assume that culture did not have that bird.
So you have your PhD paper, and then you say, all right, I know because what I found here, these are Etruscans, and then 5 years later, another PhD says, oh, not so fast.
No, it doesn't take 5 years. One of the crises in archaeology today is between the highly trained PhDs and the availability of computer databases. It's almost impossible any longer to do what William F. Albright did when he was alive, to categorically say this. And if Albright said this was Iron Age 2 is Jewish pottery, that was the law. I mean, if Albright said it, that's all the footnote you needed. That's not true anymore. And the result of that has been a great deal of digs are not published. You get what we call the coffee table editions. This is a very cheap version of that. It will be a short story with a lot of pictures, but you'll never see the stratigraphy and have it interpreted. Because after it's dug, the archaeologist often dies before he finishes writing the report. And we lose that information. And the issue is academic intimidation. Because for the purpose, everybody has to publish. And for the purpose of publication, anything you say gives the guy the next title for his magazine article. Am I making any sense at all? And it is no longer possible for one human being to grasp and encompass even a relatively small issue. So you will get challenges. Other questions? Am I making any sense? Are you getting bored with this? You should be. Okay, yeah.
How does archaeology fit into manuscript research? For example, I'm thinking that discovery, was it last year that, well, I don't know that she was an archaeologist at Yale or whether she was research manuscripts, but the scrap of manuscript that supposedly said something about Jesus' wife.
From the Dead Sea Scrolls.
Yeah.
And from an Akash in Egypt. But that one in Egypt is from the Gnostic Christian tradition. Right. And therefore is suspect right off the bat.
Now, is that considered archaeology?
Oh yeah, sure.
With dealing with manuscripts?
They really overlap. It's the archaeologist who will know about the dig and how authentic the dig is and how much the dig has integrity. If rules were broken during the dig, everything you find is questionable.
Yeah.
All right? So it's the archaeologist who certifies the dig, who works with the dig, and therefore certifies its finds. Secondly, it's the archaeologist and the historian who will know that community, whatever we know about it. Some of those things that were found in Egypt 2 years ago or 3 were not known to exist before. It was quite a find. But the Gnostics were those, let me pause for that a moment so we're all on the same page. The Gnostics were Greeks. Let's start there. Second, the Gnostics were therefore dualistic. The Gnostics did not believe that Jesus Christ was God because God could not touch matter lest he be besmirched by it. So Christians have a deficient, Gnostics have a deficient Christology, and therefore to the Orthodox Church are heretics. So yeah, Jesus had a wife. He was totally integrated into the culture of not a surprising text. Once we knew they were Gnostics, not a surprising text. Other question. The tough part of this class is you guys know too much.
All of the fakes that people produce, and that's something else that you have to deal with, I guess, in history, because they
question was fakes that people have to deal with. Go ahead.
That they found the sarcophagus
of the high priest.
Of the high priest.
Sure, Caiaphas, or the sarcophagus of James, which would mean it was the sarcophagus of Jesus' actual family. They have finally, the Israeli Antiquities Authority charged them as being frauds. But the court trial could not reach that decision. So there's no reason why we wouldn't find such a box. That's statement number 1. It was where we should have found it, statement number 2. And the people that study the inscriptions on them could not agree whether this was authentic or forgery. So it ended up without conviction. I know the man who was on trial. I bought things from the man that was on trial.
Gives you a great deal of confidence, doesn't it?
Well, yeah, he's been around a long time, and he's never been accused of forgery any other time, so I would rather think he had, well, they couldn't convict him. Does that answer your question? Yeah, and archaeologists get particularly invested in those kind of things because the integrity of the dig, the integrity of the location is an archaeological process of questioning. Studying the forgery gets to be a real specialty where you look at the patina to see whether it's been erased, polished, and so forth, or whether it looks as if it has original first century patina, and that takes them really good people. That's what the court couldn't get them to agree. Other questions? All right. I should have gone to bed early and not watched that football game, I know that. Well, to just demonstrate just how this is in a very clear point, let me turn to page 3, please, and take the Mark version of the healing of the man possessed by demons. Remember, Matthew says there were 2 men. Mark and Luke say there was only 1. John doesn't tell us the story at all. The picture at the top of the page deals with, again, you remember I said how smooth the shoreline of the Sea of Galilee is? This is a hill where you'd probably find the city. You'd find a small village down here because there's a huge port here. You see a slight remnant of some of the building there, and you say, how do you know that was a seaport? Well, when the Galilee was down lower, you could see more into the sea than you can see now. There were other foundations that surround that form a enclosed harbor to protect ships in storms. And If you look very closely, you will see what looks like a row of rocks right there on the very edge of the green area. Do you see what I'm talking about? Very small. And if you were there looking at that, you would say, how do they know that's a seaport? Well, whole rows of big rocks don't fall in a straight line by themselves. So when you see that, you immediately start taking your scuba gear and swimming around here and start swimming around a bit. And what you'll find out from this is the foundations that correspond with that. The paper that I said there were some extras of shows 18 ports on the Sea of Galilee that have been found since 1970. This is the port at the hillside of Gadara. And why do I pick that one? I don't know. It just looked like a good thing to pick. There are others that are actually much more graphic. They shoot down that row of rocks, and you see this, looks like just a straight line tumble of huge rocks. 2 volunteers would probably not pick up any of the rocks. And they will say, well, this is the port of, well, for example, Magdala. And it's inland. It's in the green grass because the sea is receded, and the port itself, the early part of that port, has kind of moved inland, but we know what it was. This is at Gadara, and I picked that one, frankly, because I believe if I had to pick of the choices, and we'll get to that on page 4, I would pick Gadara as the likely place, and I'll tell you why. The next picture down is a 4th century church at Gslc. You've probably never heard of Gslc. You've probably never heard of hippopotamuses either. In fact, when I went on the internet looking for hippo, all I could get was hippopotamuses. And one of the hippopotamus things I got was a herd of hippopotami, how about that, taking on an alligator. And the alligator lost. At any rate, this might have been laid over to the side. I suspect it was, because it's in the same area as the rest of these places, and they've stood this one up. There's several reasons for it. Anytime you re-erect a ruin, the first is you have the money to do it. Somebody cares enough to pay to have it done. And you don't pick up those columns we were looking at on page 1. I don't know that anybody picks those up. They are not hollow like your front porch post. They are solid stone. So at Gslc, here the Christian church has been rebuilt. Here we have the Gadara harbor. Now look at the front page, if you will, please. No, second page. Second page. They show Gadara down a little bit from the Sea of Galilee. But there is a path that runs down from Gadara to the sea, and it's considered to be rather ancient. It was paved in stones in the ancient fashion originally, and there is now a significant town there called Qais, Qais, which in Arabic loosely means the home of mother. That's the current name, not Gadara, but Qais. The seaport down at the bottom here is significant in its underpinnings under the sea. This would have been, in those days, in the Decapolis area, and well, of course it would have been. And Capernaum is up here at 11 o'clock on the Sea of Galilee. Let's look at the story for a moment. You pick out all the clues you can find. And we've got 10 minutes to do it. No, I don't have to preach today. I don't have to go back at all. They came to the other side of the sea, to the country of the Gerasenes. Nobody knows where that is. And when he had stepped out of the boat, immediately a man out of the tomb with an unclean spirit met him. He lived among the tombs, and no one could restrain him anymore, even with a chain. After he had often been restrained with shackles and chains, but the chains he wrenched apart, often he had been, but the chains he had wrenched apart, and the shackles he broke in pieces, and no one had the strength to subdue him. Night and day among the tombs and on the mountain, he was always howling and bruising himself with stones. When he saw Jesus from a distance, he ran and bowed down before him, and he shouted at the top of his voice, "What have you to do with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I adjure you by God, do not torment me." For he has said to him, "Come out of the man, you unclean spirit." Then Jesus asked him, "What is your name?" He replied, "My name is Legion, for we are many." He begged him earnestly not to send them out of the country. Now there on the hillside a great herd of swine was feeding, and the unclean spirit begged him, "Send us into the swine, let us enter them." So he gave them permission, and the unclean spirits came and entered the swine, and the herd, numbering about 2,000, rushed down the steep bank into the sea and were drowned in the sea. The swineherds ran off and told it in the city and in the country. Then people came to see what it was that happened. They came to Jesus and saw the demoniac sitting there, clothed and in his right mind, the very man who had had legion. And they were afraid. Those who had seen what happened to the demoniac and to the swine reported it. Then they began to beg Jesus to leave their neighborhood. As he was getting into the boat, the man who had been possessed by demons begged him that he might be with him. But Jesus refused and said to him, "Go home to your friends and tell them how much the Lord has done for you and what mercy he has shown to you." And he went away and began to proclaim in the Decapolis how much Jesus had done for him, and everyone was amazed. What are the signs and signals there that give us a hint of where it was? Of course, it ends by saying the Decapolis, but as you can see from the map, the Decapolis is a huge area. So what test do we have to meet? What has to be at this site to be a candidate? There are 5 cities that claim this miracle, all right? Or 5 ruins that claim this miracle. Which one has the best claim? No fair in looking on page 4 where I tell you.
It has to be by the sea, so...
All right, first of all, it has to be by the sea. This whole thing happens relatively at the sea. Second thing, it has to have tombs. That would not have been inside any city, although this is the Greek side, it might have been. Yeah?
Yeah, I was going to mention it. It talks about tombs, and what tombs usually built into the limestone hillside or something.
Could be, right? So it could be tombs built in a hillside in which he could live. Said he lived among the tombs. But we know that Jesus has just stepped out of the boat. It doesn't have to be near the sea. It's got to be at the sea. All right? Yeah?
There's a hillside right next to the sea.
I'm sorry?
There's a hillside right next to this.
Yeah, on that picture, yep.
Oh, and in the passage too, it says,
Yeah.
sheep are on the hillside.
Most of these places have 1 or 2 or 3 of the, and they also have ancient early Christian tradition behind them. There are cathedral churches built, seats of bishops in most of these places that were destroyed by the earthquakes. So a number of them have some of the signs, but it had to be not near the sea. It has to be next to the sea, as the Bible tells the story. It has to be a hill that the swine are grazing on so that they can rush down into the sea. What else? It would not have been on the west side of the Galilee. Why? Well, it says he went across the sea, that's right. And this is almost from Capernaum, the furthest point they could have gone. Yeah.
Wouldn't the swine be with the Gentiles rather than the Jewish? So it would be on the east?
A Jew is always safe from slaughter in Jewish territory. A pig, I mean, is always safe from slaughter. They used to say, Herod the Great, you know, had his wife killed and his favorite son killed because he heard the rumor they were plotting to remove him from the throne. He was nuts, and a lot of sensitive people knew that. he got the rumor he had Mariamne and his choice son slain, so that people in the streets said it was safer to be a pig in Herod's house than his son.
It would have to be near mountains.
I'm sorry?
It would have to be near mountains because it says that he was...
Had to be at least a hill, a mountain of work.
Heights,
Yeah,
like Golan Heights?
yeah. Well, it's all on the Golan Heights, or very near it. Gadara is not the Golan Heights technically, but it's right there alongside it. Any other things we see? No, there would have never been any swine, any pigs in a Jewish community is what I'm trying to say. Any other comments?
The harbor.
Right? All these places have harbors, though. If you look at the chart I kind of mashed together on page 4, you will see 5 of the candidates for this location. Kersey is right diametrically across from Magdala.